Hi, I am your caster Hotohori, and I'm bringing you back to another Owl Power Rankings presented by Beehive. It's been a crazy week in the Overwatch League, and we're just going to try to rank these teams as best we can. With all the happenings that's going on, it's been pretty rough this week, so let's get started. At number 12, we have the Shanghai Dragons. The Dragons are coming off a pretty decent week for being the Dragons. They've actually went 5 maps with the Philadelphia Fusion, almost taking the win, but not coming up tops with losing on the very end on Lijiang Tower. But the big upside was in the beginning of day 1, they did take a map off of Seoul Dynasty. So that is a huge improvement for the Shanghai Dragons. No wins this week, but maybe possibly after week 4, who knows, they might pick up a surprise win. At number 11, we have the Florida Mayhem. Now, Florida is still on a terrible lack of form. Unfortunately, they have lost both their matches this week and losing to the Valiant 3-1, picking up the final map, but they did lose to the Houston Outlaws 4-0. So not looking very good for the Florida Mayhem thus far. They're getting a little better, but I think it's just going to be rough goings for them going into the sort of the future of the Overwatch League. Number 10 brings us the San Francisco Shock. The Shock did not look good this week at all. They lost 3-0 to the Dallas Fuel, though they did pick up a 1 map out of 4 versus the London Spitfire, but in both games the San Francisco Shock just looked outclassed. And until they actually get their supplemental players who are sort of banned from the league by age, unfortunately, the Shock are probably going to still stay in the bottom 3 for sort of weeks to come at this rate. At number 9, we have the Dallas Fuel. Now, Dallas picking up their first win this week versus the San Francisco Shock 3-0, end up losing to the Boston Uprising 3-2 in what might be considered a minor upset, but not in this caster's eyes. Dallas are very, very inconsistent, and they still have issues with their team. Though things are looking up because it was announced today that AKM of Team Rogue previously is going to be signing on with the Dallas Fuel after Stage 2. So good news on the DPS front for the Dallas Fuel, which by picking up AKM, who is probably the #1 free agent in all of Overwatch right now, at least in this caster's eyes, is a huge pickup by the Dallas Fuel and should improve their prospects. But it's going to be tough going here for the rest of Stage 1 for the Dallas Fuel. At number 8, we have the Los Angeles Gladiators. Now, the Gladiators had a fantastic match with the Valiant in the Battle of LA on day 1 of week 3, but unfortunately they just looked awful against the Houston Outlaws, just losing 4-0 and looking like they were just not in the match, unfortunately. The Gladiators do have the good DPS lineup, but going into the weeks ahead, it's probably going to be a little tough going for them, and I'm thinking the Gladiators here are probably settling into where they're going to be normally, around mid-table with regards to this caster's power rankings. Now, at number 7, we have the Los Angeles Valiant, and this ranking is really not because of anything that the Valiant have done. Honestly, the Los Angeles Valiant looked very, very good in their reverse sweep win of the Battle of LA, and then come off a 3-1 win off the Florida Mayhem. The problem is that the Los Angeles Valiant just really didn't have quality opponents this week. A win over the Gladiators was big, but the Gladiators are settling into the mid-table, and a win over Florida is beating up on your redheaded stepchild, essentially, at this point. So, unfortunately, the Valiant move not up, but down in the power rankings because of the happenings this week. At number 6, we have the Houston Outlaws. Now, some might think this is a little low for the Outlaws themselves with regards to the power rankings, but this is an adjustment just due to the fact of the happenings this week. The Outlaws had great 4-0 wins over both Florida and Los Angeles. The problem is that Houston just looked dominant against teams that are just not necessarily the greatest in the world. And they should be winning these wins, and they should be picking up 4-0 wins and crushing the opponents. So as long as they stay consistent here and then keep moving, they'll keep moving up the tables, I think, and it'll be good for the Houston fans and the Optic Gaming fans who were following the Outlaws. At number 5, we have the first of the two Korean killers, the Philadelphia Fusion. Now, the Fusion looked somewhat ordinary again in their match against the Shanghai Dragons, but I think they were really just coming off of a high. That win over New York Excelsior was really, really unpredicted, and they looked absolutely fantastic. The DPS duo of Carpe and Shadowburn just rocked the house, and New York did not know what hit them. It did take 5 maps, but my god, the Philadelphia Fusion are for real. The issue is their DPS. Carpe and Shadowburn have to stay consistent, because if they don't, then they're going to have serious issues with some of the mid-table teams, and they look like one of those teams that really play up for their opponent. If their opponent's good, they'll be great. If they don't, then they might not look fantastic. So kudos to the Philadelphia Fusion on their big win this week over NYXL. Number 4, we have a drop out of the top 3 for a Korean team, the London Spitfire. Now, London had issues last week, dropping a map to the Dallas Fuel, and then dropping a couple of maps to the Dallas Fuel, and then dropping another map to a pretty mid-table opponent. And now London finally lost, and it cost them against the Boston Uprising. So London, with having looks like some stability issues here, has dropped out of the top 3, and that has allowed them, a team that is not fully Korean, to take the 3rd spot, and that 3rd spot goes to the Boston Uprising. The Boston Uprising had a fantastic week. They beat the London Spitfire 3-2 as previously mentioned, but they also beat the Dallas Fuel 3-2. Now, Dallas is a team that everybody knows is super, super talented and is going through some sort of team melees or issue or whatever it is. But Boston has earned their way up into the top 3 ranking by beating quality opponents. If it wasn't for the fact that they just had a horrible start to the season, they probably could be occupying the top 2 spots. But that is a tremendous achievement by the Boston Uprising at the number 3 spot. At number 2, we have the Seoul Dynasty. Now, Seoul looked pretty shaky there against the Shanghai Dragons. 3-1 score does not reflect the fact that Seoul possibly could have taken this to a 5-game series, because they looked they needed heroics from Toby and from the rest of the squad to win Numbani, and then they end up winning at the very end and still give up a map to the Shanghai Dragons. And then came the very next day on match day 3, where they ended up losing to the New York Excelsior in one of the sort of best matches so far of stage 1, 3-2. So you can't really rank Seoul as the best team in the Overwatch League this week. That goes to NYXL, the New York Excelsior. When you beat Seoul, you beat the best. And that is what New York Excelsior did. Yes, they lost to the Philadelphia Fusion 3-2, but Philadelphia was having a great week, and Philadelphia is a team that can pretty much beat anyone. And unfortunately, they got beaten that day, but they turned it around, played the early game against Seoul, and then beat them 3-2. So no hangover from that loss to the Philadelphia Fusion. So absolutely kudos to them, and kudos to the New York Excelsior for taking top spot in this week's power rankings. Do you agree? There were so many topsy-turvy sort of results in this week's Overwatch League that it was almost impossible to do a power rankings this week because of who beat who and what happened where. But these are my power rankings for this week after week 3. New York Excelsior take the top spot in the power rankings. So I hope you enjoyed watching these Owl power rankings presented by myself, presented by Beehive. I am your caster, Hotohori. Please join us on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel, or if you would want to see some live content, I have a weekly update show with regards to the Overwatch League on Twitch. I broadcast it with my friends at Team Blackwatch. And if you want audio of this or any other podcast that I've done, please go to my Podbean site at hotohori.podbean.com for audio of this great power rankings and my other shows that I have available. Thank you so much for joining us today. These have been the Owl Power Rankings presented by Beehive. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.